What's up, plant family? Devin is here. Thank you for joining me on another episode, I think they're called episodes now, of Plant Vibrations. If you're new to the channel, thanks for joining me. If you enjoy it afterwards, think about subscribing. Definitely give it a like if you enjoy the content. If you're back again, thanks for being here again. So today I wanted to talk about one of the stalwarts of my houseplant garden. That would be this guy, the Jade Crassula ovata. This is definitely one of the very best houseplants that anyone can grow. I know it's a mainstay houseplant for a lot of us, but I also get a lot of questions on this plant, so I thought it was a good time to create a video on some of the care tips for the jade plant, as well as some of my tips for how to increase this nice thick trunk to occur. And of course, we'll be talking about propagation as well. So if those are some of the topics that you are interested in, stay tuned for the rest of this episode. All right, so the jade or Crassula ovata, this is a plant. It comes from South Africa. That's one of its native regions. I was doing some research earlier and it looks like I was looking at where it comes from, primarily on the eastern Cape of South Africa. It looks like a mind-blowing place. I've not been to South Africa before. My little sister, she was there for like a few months, and she told me the plant life there is unlike anywhere else in the world. And I know, being in the plant industry for my entire life, South Africa is known to be one of these locations, one of these like pockets of the world where the plant life is just unlike anywhere else. I know my family, we offer tons of different plants that originally we offer tons of different hybrids of plants that come from South Africa, a lot of different succulents. It's very well known as one of the greatest plant locations in the world. So hopefully I can go and do some plant exploration down there soon. But over there in South Africa, the jade, the Crassula ovata, it's kind of like an understory plant. From what I was reading, it grows up to 6 feet in height over there. Inside the home, they really kind of top out at around 3 feet in height. And one of the reasons why a lot of gardeners, a lot of people love having the jade plant inside is that this is a plant that has sort of this natural bonsai look just on its own without doing any sort of bonsai treatment, any bonsai kind of techniques. You can get a really nice old looking specimen that may be actually quite young. So one of the interesting things, you know, I'll always like to kind of look up what the Latin names actually mean. If there typically is some sort of meaning behind the Latin names of pretty much every plant. And the Latin name, like I had just mentioned, Crassula ovata, Crassula stands for or means like thick, fat, plump, and then ovata stands for egg-shaped. So that is definitely a reference to the thick, fat, swollen trunks that they can create and the egg-shaped foliage that is succulent foliage. Now, as a succulent, we know that it holds moisture within the foliage. So I'll show you, I'll just pick off a leaf right here, break it open, and show you guys. You can see the moisture in that foliage. That is a good sign to us that it is in fact very drought tolerant and can go quite a long period of time without watering. So that kind of brings us to our first care point, is the amount of water that these plants need. As a succulent, they don't need very much water. That is absolutely the case. But you know, there's no such thing as, you know, one kind of care point acting alone. Definitely the amount of water is dependent on the amount of sunlight that the plant receives. Of course, those are always, and the warmth of the situation, of the climate, of the area that is being grown. We know from my previous videos that those are, you know, a lot of the factors that really go into how much water. If you saw my houseplant video on how to water our plants or how to think about watering our plants, that is, I dive a little bit deeper into that subject. So, water and light. As a succulent coming from South Africa, this is a plant that definitely, the more light, the better. Now, I have mine here back on this shelf, and I don't have any grow lights. Let's move this camera so you can see a little bit better the situation. So you can see I have it on this shelf. There's no grow lights anywhere nearby, but this is a very nice bright room. I have windows all around. So over here, this is a south facing, like south is that direction. So it gets really nice bright lighting all the time. And you can obviously see I have all these different grow lights around here. But the fact of the matter is it could be getting more sunlight than I am actually giving it. And that would probably make it even happier. You know, I have this light shining right on my calla, which kind of, you know, gives a little bit of extra glare or a little bit of extra brightness to the jade, but not a whole heck of a lot. So since I don't have it in the brightest location in my houseplant garden, I'm not going to water it as much as I might my monstera or my fiddle leaf fig that have a grow light and they're like right next to the window. I'm watering this plant in the summertime about once every 10 days or so, and in the winter, once every 15 days or so. Definitely watering less in the winter and more in the summer. Like I had mentioned in my past videos, that factor of how much sunlight and how much warmth really determine how much we're going to be watering our plants. So the biggest thing to notice though is that generally less water is better than more water. These plants, they need great drainage. They don't want to have their roots super wet and sopping in water all the time. Overwatering is probably the most common cause of a bad performing plant. And the second most common cause of a bad performing plant is not enough light. Now, because I don't have mine in a big sunny location, it's not growing hardly at all. It's pretty much at a still point. Back when I was living in Seattle, I had it in a southern facing window. It got really intense sunlight and grew a heck of a lot. And then I moved to Pennsylvania and I have it just kind of in this back corner. It doesn't get a ton of light, and as such, it doesn't get a lot of growth. Now the thing is, with succulents, some of my other succulents that I have, such as this is a Daiso cactus. You can see it's just about getting ready to bloom again. When it comes to our succulents, cactus, things like that, jade, if they're not getting enough light and you're giving it regular watering, what's going to happen is that they will in fact try to grow, and they will grow. They'll grow, but the growth will be weak. The stems will be weak. They won't be able to stand upright. It'll be very droopy kind of look. The leaves will they'll be kind of sad looking, and for me, that's not what I want. So I would rather have less growth, and as such, you know, not giving it hardly any water while it's not getting a ton of sunlight. If you are giving it a lot of, ample water and not enough sunlight, that growth will not be that great, okay? So bear that in mind, very, very important. You can also see this is a relatively good sized plant in a pretty small container. I've had it in this container for the last 5 years or so, and I'm going to show you guys a cool technique on how to root prune this in order to encourage a thicker trunk here in a bit. So before we get into that, in terms of the soil mixture medium that I like to use, I use, while I have my video on showing a good soil mix that I use for most of my houseplants, for this plant in particular, I think a 50-50 blend of just normal potting mix and perlite is perfect. It's going to create a very high draining environment so that when you water, the water isn't being, isn't retained in that soil. It's quickly flushing through, which is what this likes. And also having it in a small pot that is you allow your plant to get root bound. You allow the plant's roots to really extend throughout the container and remain root bound for a long time. That is also going to encourage good drainage. So always err on the side of a smaller container rather than a larger container. The larger container will hold that moisture longer and thus create that weaker, droopier growth, especially if not given a lot of good sunlight. A southern window is great. If you have a warm climate that doesn't get below 55 degrees, you can grow it outside, a-okay. Actually, these can probably handle further down to like 40 degrees. If you live where I do in Pennsylvania, putting it outside in the summertime is great. No more, I don't think any more than like morning sunlight. A couple hours of good sunlight is great. You really don't need to give it much more than that, especially if you're transitioning it from a house plant to an outdoor plant and back and forth. Once they've been outside for a long time, yeah, they can definitely handle full sun situation, but it's you know, inside the home, a southern window, fantastic. A grow light, great. Western window, great. Anything less than that is gonna be suboptimal, all right? So now let's talk a little bit more about how to encourage this thicker growth, this thicker trunk, which most of us are trying to achieve. All right, so I'm here in my greenhouse room. Quick thought, if you would be interested to know like all the different tools and things that I keep in this greenhouse room, leave a comment. I've been thinking about making a video. If it sounds something interesting, definitely let me know. So the first thing to take a note of, if you really want to encourage that thick trunk, what you need to do is definitely remove any growth that is coming along the trunk that you don't necessarily want. So here you can see growth coming out here, and you can also see this other growth that is coming out of the base here. So by removing that growth, a lot of the energy gets sent back into that main trunk. Another thing to do is in the springtime or in the summertime, you can remove some of the tips of this growth. And that is actually also going to, one, encourage branching, but it's also going to help encourage thicker trunk formation, thicker stems to grow. Now, one of the things that I love about these plants is that the new growth always has this nice fleshy green kind of stems, and then it becomes darker and looks like woodiness as it matures. It's not actually woody, it hasn't lignified, which is, you know, if you think about like a lavender that you may have grown over time, the stems become woody. This isn't true wood, but it does have that kind of woody look. All right, so the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove some of this bottom growth. Now I'm gonna take my shears and I'm gonna cut as far down as possible, all right? Just like that. Now we're gonna save this and I'm gonna talk about what to do with this in terms of propagation here in a little bit, all right? So we'll hold on to this, put it over to the side. Now I'm also going to remove this guy right here. I don't personally want to see any reason to remove any of this top growth, so I'm gonna leave this be, but if you wanted to really kind of, if the stems are getting too heavy and you want to reduce some of that weight, you can take off sections that are about like this, maybe 3 inches or so. The thing is, these plants, because the foliage is holding moisture, they will get very top heavy. It's definitely best to use terracotta or some other sort of porous container. Check out my container video for some ideas, but I think terracotta is the way to go with these. Definitely the easiest. Stick away from plastic, stay away from anything that doesn't have drainage holes. I think that would be my best recommendation. All right, so now we're gonna do some root pruning. Root pruning, basically, I'm gonna take this out, prune away some of the roots, and then replant it in the same size container. I don't need it to have it be in a larger container, but one of the benefits, a couple benefits. Number one, I'm gonna be changing out the soil. So giving it fresh soil is always a good thing to do. Every 3-4 years or so. I haven't done this, I haven't changed the soil out in a while. Number two, pruning those roots back is it's an essential technique in the bonsai world. I'm definitely not a bonsai. I don't really know much about bonsai, but I do know by pruning the roots back, you're also going to encourage like a very compact kind of growth. If that's not what you're looking for, skip this part. Root pruning isn't for you. But for me, it's something that I think is cool to do and can create a very unique outcome, all right? So let's take it out. Oh, all right. Here you go. That you can see that was nice and full. Start just by kind of brushing away. I had this sand on top. I thought the sand would be cool. Turns out I didn't really like the sand, so that's another benefit for doing this for me. I don't have to see that sand anymore. All right, so we'll start just by using our hands, breaking it up like we would for anything. And honestly, you can just kind of like remove basically a little bit of the extra soil, break it up a little bit. You can see that the roots are very fine. So I'm honestly just pruning away. Typically, root pruning, you would need to use, you know, some good shears, but I'm honestly just using it with my hands, and this is A-okay, this is perfect. When you start to feel in the middle, you can feel that it has a nice thick root ball. Don't mess with that, just leave that be. Just kind of some of these thinner, finer roots along the edges. Now a lot of this kind of excess rooty soil, get rid of it. You don't want to reuse that soil. It's always important. Discard soil that has been really utilized. If you're changing the soil from changing the soil of one of your houseplants, get rid of that old soil because it's really deplete of nutrition at this point. Okay? So it really is that easy to root prune. It's not something you want to do every 6 months or even every year, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, and that's about it. So you can see I kind of eliminated about half of the roots in there, and now what I'm going to do, let's see if it's going to stay upright on its own. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill this back up with fresh soil, and this is going to be, like I had mentioned earlier, about 50% potting mix and like 50%. I have got some pebbles in here mixed with perlite. So that should be a pretty good mix. And we're just going to pot it up like we would any sort of plant. Oh, don't fall on me. Just looks so cool. I wish I could just leave it out like that. It's going to fall. All right. Putting it on the ground. It's like 50% full. Now, let's see if that's about the right height that I want. That's pretty darn good. Now, of course, always fill it in a little bit more. A good time to do this would be in its active growth period, which is like spring, summertime. It's better to not do this in, December or something, unless you have like a really nice warm environment or you live in, SoCal, Southern California, Florida, something like that. For most of us with our 4 seasons, spring is a good time to do this. Thankfully, we're just entering spring here. All right, and then of course you just gave it a lot of stress. Help to lessen that stress by giving it some water. And we will let this dry out before we water it again, all right? Okay, so that's pretty much the techniques for encouraging that thicker trunk formation. Now let's talk about propagation. Okay, so I have this nice cutting that I cut off the base of that tree. Now, actually I can cut it into 2 if I really want to. Have this one and this guy over here. Let's use this guy, this will be easy. All right, so we can see that there's sets of leaves. They're opposite leaves, 1, 2 sets, 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets of opposite leaves. This is what, maybe 5, 6 inches in height. I've got my little propagation starter pot, plastic pot, and I have filled it with that perlite and potting mix combination. And so, like always, I like to fill up the container and then I like to water it in. It makes propagation so much easier to do. Water in that soil first, right? Now, the reason I was showing you these sets of leaves is because each of those sets of leaves represents the nodes. You can definitely propagate this plant just from a single leaf, but I find it's faster and just, I don't know, I prefer to just do cuttings like this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove bottom leaf number 1, bottom leaf set number 1, and bottom leaf set number 2. So now I have 2 nice nodes, nodes being where those leaves came out of. I removed them, I removed those bottom leaves. So you can see I removed the bottom leaves. And now I'm going to take my soil that I just moistened and I'm going to stick them in so that both of those nodes are in the soil. Just like that. These plants are super easy to propagate. One of the reasons why they're called the friendship plant, also called the money plant, because you can just increase your quantity of them like infinitely. All right, so here is my nice little propagation. Now I'm going to show you where I like to keep it, how I like to get them started for optimal success. All right, welcome to my propagation station. Let me turn this light off so we can see better. So my propagation station is comprised of a heat mat. You can see under here. This is like a $15 heat mat. I'll leave a link in the description. If you don't have one, get one. These things are amazing. I start all my propagations. They really increase the rate of success. And just in the back over here, you can see this jade that I had started I started this maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago. You can see there's new growth. How do you know if your propagation was a success? If you can see new growth coming out of the top, that means that it was successful. Should we pull it out to see if there's roots? It might be harmful, but I'll do it anyway. All right, let's see. Don't do this unless you really need to, or you're making a video or showing people how to do it, okay? Oh, see how that stays together? That means there's roots growing. Oh my gosh. 6 to 8 weeks after planting that cutting that I just showed you guys, it's fully rooted. It has new top growth. It is amazing. These plants they're definitely a blessing. Share them. If you have one, share it with someone that needs a little plant inspiration in their lives, because they are so fun and they're really easy to grow. And now you know how to thicken up those roots, you know how to propagate, you know how to care for them, you know everything you need to know about the jade plant now. At least I hope you do. Oh yeah, maybe you're wondering about fertilizer. I use something called Roberta's Bounty fertilizer. I use it once a month on all of my houseplants, including the jade. So I can leave a link for that in the description as well. But if there's any part of the plant that I forgot to talk about, please let me know in the comments. If you have other care tips or other experiences than I had mentioned, definitely leave a comment and let me know below. Think about subscribing. We try to come up with new videos every single Sunday that are longer form like this one. And then during the week, I like to do like 1 or 2 of the YouTube shorts, just like a 15-30 second video, just something fun about plants. Anyways, thanks for joining me here on Plant Vibrations. I hope this video was informative and a little bit fun. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon. Ciao.